This is the Law 401 podcast, legal issues decoded for you, brought to you by Roger Williams University School of Law. Hello, I am excited to welcome you to Law 401 Legal Issues Decoded, a podcast from Roger Williams University School of Law where we break down the legal issues of the day, the ones making headlines in Rhode Island and beyond, and try to make everything a bit more accessible. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Michael Donnelly-Boylen. Nice to meet you all.
Before we dive in, Michael, do you want to share our big news?
Our big news. Folks, we've heard from you that you would like this podcast to actually be weekly. So as of this week, we will be dropping this podcast every single week, and we'll be moving it to Tuesdays.
That's so fun. That means more episodes, more conversations, more my making fun of you for not living in Rhode Island. But I want to make sure that everyone is getting the benefit of all this awesomeness. So please subscribe to our podcast, like us, leave a review, send us an email. We're desperate for feedback from our listeners.
Desperate, aren't we, Nicole?
Well, I mean, I am.
And today's episode is the perfect example of why we're excited to go weekly. We are joined by United States Senator Jack Reed, who's going to help us break down the changes to the student loan programs in what has been dubbed the Big Beautiful Bill. And that's going to be important to you whether you are currently in college, whether you're already paying student loans, or whether you're planning to go to college.
We're also going to talk about some of the changes at the Department of Education, what this could mean for all students of any age and their parents. And spoiler, these changes that are happening at the federal level have more impact on life here in Rhode Island than you might think.
Welcome to the podcast, Senator Reed.
Thanks, Michael, very much. Nicole, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Senator, for Rhode Islanders at home, can you walk us through just in general what the Big Beautiful Bill is? When you hear that term, what does that generally mean?
It generally means to me a disaster for the state of Rhode Island and for the national economy and for many other aspects. I know we're going to focus on the student loan programs, but the impact, it comes in many different directions. There's massive cuts to health care. They're essentially trying to effectively end Medicaid, which for Rhode Island will mean undermining an already very fragile medical delivery system. And the state's going to be in a very difficult position. They're also going after nutrition programs, the SNAP program for children. And contrary to what everybody thinks about those deficit hawks in the Republican Party, they've raised the deficit to a staggering amount of over $4 trillion. What that is doing is affecting many parts of the country, and particularly the student loan program. Student loan program is set up to based on the Treasury bill rates. And so as the Treasury bill rates go up, which they are, then student lending and borrowing will go up. Now, right now, the interest rate for undergraduates is 6.39%. For graduate students, it's 7.94%. For parents and graduate students who are borrowing under the PLUS loan, that's a parent loan but also can be used by others, it's 8.94%. You're talking about significant cost to going to school. And it's also coming at a time when there's a lot of uncertainty and chaos in the whole student lending area. President Biden went a long way to try to forgive, under very thoughtful guidance, a lot of outstanding loans, etc. Trump has renounced that. And so now we're in this sort of gray area where some people thought they discharged a loan. They haven't. Interest is accruing. And we're having a very, very difficult situation. In fact, in Rhode Island, the data shows that 1 out of 5 students, borrowers, are behind in their loan payments.
And that's before this has got through.
That's actually before this got more expensive, more difficult, et cetera. So, but in summary, kind of the big package is very simple. They use programs critical to our community, Medicaid, SNAP programs for food, student loan funding, et cetera, to pay for extraordinary tax benefits for the very wealthy. they're going to get incredible benefits from this bill, and the average person is going to see what little benefits they get from tax relief really overwhelmed by the other costs that are built in here. And the state is going to be in a very difficult position. They're essentially, our colleagues, my colleagues in General Assembly and the governor and everybody decide, well, what are they going to save? Are they going to save the healthcare system? Are they going to save the education system?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I would like to ask about something especially controversial, which is the public service loan forgiveness. So at our law school, that was part of our mission. We have social justice. And so I'm really interested on behalf of our students and all students, what are some of the legal changes to this program and how do they affect borrowers currently enrolled or planning to enter public service careers?
Well, the actual changes legislatively to the public service loan program are not significant. The problem is that the president doesn't really follow the law in many cases or the Constitution. And what the biggest fear we have is that they will suddenly start applying their DEI criteria to those jobs which they consider public service. Now, most state and local government jobs, I think, will be secure, but nonprofit jobs, they could say, well, we don't like what that agency's doing, therefore that doesn't count, or you're out of the program, etc. It's not part of the text, but it's part of what he does every day. Redefine the law to his satisfaction and leave it that way. So that's our greatest fear, that he's going to do what he typically does, which is say, I don't like this program because it includes DEI.
Can I poke a little bit
Sure.
on that? What if you're a Rhode Island teacher and you're teaching the history of colonization and indigenous rights? Or what if you're a public defender and this is in the Constitution that people have this right? Or maybe you're a social worker. Will those types of jobs still qualify under the new system?
Well, again, under the law, there's been no fundamental change to those public service jobs. But the fear we have, and it's manifest every day, is that the president will start saying, by rule or executive order, this job doesn't work. Now, the difficulty is getting down into the really details of the job. My sense is that he's not going to go and he can't identify individuals who have a special practice as public defenders. They defend these people. And what he will do is find an organization, for example, that stresses gender equality and say, well, that organization is out and everybody who works there is out. And that's the way I think he'll go after it.
Thanks for clarifying.
Surely.
Do you think this is going to discourage average Rhode Islanders from actually going into public service jobs to begin with? I mean, I worry about our healthcare system and our doctors not wanting to go and work for nonprofit hospitals and fear that they won't qualify for PSLF if they work for the wrong employer.
Yeah. No, I think it will. First of all, we're seeing a significant shift. Fire departments, police departments having a difficult time to recruit. And when I was a kid, which is a while ago, the competition was fierce. Hundreds of people for one job. Now they're having a very difficult time. It's, I think, a manifestation of a lot of factors. The impact of COVID, which we still haven't fully understood. Social media, just a different approach. And I think, though, this will be another sort of detriment, because what you'll see is just total confusion. That's what he deals with. So that people say, well, I'm not quite sure I'll get this loan forgiveness, even if I go into this function, because who knows, 2 years from now, he could say, well, that's out too.
Yeah, I feel like nothing is certain right now, and that's probably the greatest uncertainty. And I can't imagine being 18, going to college and trying to figure this all out in that situation. Certainly not going to law school at 22 or going to med school or going to graduate school.
Well, you're right, because, a lot of the changes they've made in terms of the structure of the program is directed at graduate students. They really left the undergraduates alone in terms of how much they can borrow, etc. But for master's degrees and professional students, they have caps on the amount you can borrow. And that's going to dissuade a lot of young people, because nowadays higher ed, I don't have to tell you, it's very expensive. And that's going to force them either to say, I can't go, or I have to get private loans, which are much more expensive than the government loans. And then they've also taken the repayment plans and collapsed them into two. One is the general payment plan. You can pick 10, 15, or 25 years and you make your payments. Or low-income people can go to something they call the repayment assistance plan, and that's you're eligible for loan forgiveness at some point, but that's 20 or 25 years in repayment. So that's it. And then they're also doing something which is, to me, sort of interesting. They're saying that as we go forward, we're going to start looking at the graduate earnings as a means to determine what school is eligible to be in the program.
Really? I hadn't heard that.
And that is, that's just not what education is about. Education is about, yes, preparing you for a successful career, but also educating you and helping out your community. So that's one thing that we have to keep a close eye on going forward. Because once again, he could be very arbitrary about this, say, well, that school, they don't make that much earnings, et cetera.
You talked about tighter loan caps and that the implications that there might be for professional versus non-professional graduate programs. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What is professional? What is not professional?
Well, yeah.
What's the distinction?
The professional is pretty much what I think everyone would understand. A law degree, an MD, a professional degree in dentistry, podiatry, theology, etc. What is not clear is how they're going to treat a PhD in English or literature or something like that. That is still subject to rulemaking, also subject to presidential influence. They're going to have to issue new regulations, the Department of Education, that lays specifically out what are the professional degrees and what are the graduate degrees that are not professional, because there's different limits and different caps on those things.
As you being the most famous library advocate that our country has, is a librarian degree a master's? I am a librarian.
Yeah.
Is my degree a professional degree?
I think, frankly, we'll have to wait for the rule to be promulgated, because the way they're looking at it now, the feeling is they're looking at the traditional doctors, i.e., ironically, I guess that would include a doctor of law, but no, I don't think that's But no, the clear ones are medical doctor, veterinarian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Librarians, I think, are the most important people in the world, frankly. They should be considered as professionals.
Nicole's
I
heart
hope
is
they
beating
can.
on her
Well,
chest
no,
right now.
I'm not going to argue. We're basically saints.
Libraries are the center of our community. It's not just about books. It's about, and we're losing that center, that cohesive element that brings us together, at least to go in and listen to a talk at a library, or get a book out and talk to our neighbor.
What's I think most interesting to me is that the lived experience of Rhode Islanders, if we're talking college students, it sounds like it's not going to change much. At the law school, because we reset our tuition 15 years ago and we're the lowest priced private in the Northeast, I don't think we're in as much trouble as 90% of our other law schools. But the medical school in Brown?
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be real pressure on a medical school because it's an expensive education.
Where my husband went to medical school, we're sitting on over $400,000 in debt.
I know.
That's insane.
Well, here's the other thing, too. The medical schools are really intertwined with a lot of the research efforts under NIH. those cuts to NIH are going to force every medical school to start cutting back, rearranging, etc. So it's a real blow. Now, the other area that you have to be concerned about is state support for state schools. Because as I described in the beginning, with the impact of cuts to Medicaid, the impact of cuts to education, the impact of cuts in so many different ways, the state's going to have to decide, well, what do we do? And I think one thing they're going to do, which they've been doing traditionally, is they'll start cutting back on state support for public education and college education. The tuition back in the good old days of URI was relatively low because the state paid for a significant part of their operations. Today, they don't. Tuition isn't high. So that's one of the things I think you'll see. The cost of colleges, which are today seen as really good bargains, University of Rhode Island College, et cetera, will start going up and up and up and up. And that'll dissuade young people from going.
So this is just going to roll downhill.
Yes, it'll have so many consequences, second and third order effects, and indeed, this whole administration does not think about the collateral damage they're doing. They don't think really about cost benefit analysis. That it's just cost. Take these costs out. Well, that's nice, but now we've lost the benefit of these trained, talented personnel who do the job, so we can't do the job anymore. So we're in a very difficult situation.
Can we shift a little to the Department of Education generally? Sure. The administration has signaled it wants to drastically reduce the department's role or even totally phase it out, and there is some runway for that happening. How would you imagine that would affect the average Rhode Islander? Somebody sitting at home listening to the podcast who has kids, what does it mean to eliminate sort of that part of government?
Well, it would be a tremendous impact on the state, but also municipalities, since most of our schools are supported by the local communities. I'll give just a couple of ideas. Title I, which is designed to assist low-income communities like Providence, Pawtucket. Last year, $65 million of Title I money came in. I could see them cutting that back dramatically. You asked the question, how is Providence, Pawtucket, and Central Falls going to make up for it?
Can you do us a favor? Can you tell us, the audience, what Title I is, if anyone doesn't know? No, it's okay.
No, Title I is education for basically low-income students and low-income communities. It was part of the Great Society going way back to the 1960s, where they knew that these center city urban schools and some rural schools just did not have the resources to maintain appropriate education levels. So we created the Title I program. It's designed for those low-income areas, both urban and some rural, and that substantially supports a lot of what's done in Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls, our core cities. And then I could go down to IDEA, is the Individual Disability Education Act. That is the bill that we passed to help children who have disabilities, ranging from healthcare issues to mental health care issues, et cetera. And last year, the state got about $60 million. Now, if that goes away, we really can't help these children in school. And, we have, fortunately, today, children who have serious medical issues, but they can go to school because there's an attendant with them that can help them, or there's someone in the facility that's supported by the IDEA funding. And so what you're going to see is a real crisis where some families are going to say, I can't send my child to school any longer because they can't take care of them. And oh, by the way, I can't work any longer because I have to stay home with my child. So these are the kind of real crises that families here are going to face. School nutrition, $48 million last year. So guess what? The lunches are going to get less attractive and more expensive. And nutrition is critical to education. In fact, the reality is in some cases that's the only really good meal a youngster will get during the day, and we're cutting back. So we've got career and technical training, and a lot of what we're trying to emphasize now for the new era, where, for example, Electric Boat is looking high and low for welders and sheet metal workers, and we've got programs at Carverty High School and other high schools. We have a program in Westerly, et cetera. But that money is going to go away too. So where are we going to get our sheet metal workers, our plumbers, our pipe fitters, et cetera? And you can just go down. The other point I'll make too is, because I'm going back to Medicaid, last year our school systems in the state got $32 million in Medicaid funding. That goes along with the IDEA funding. That's actually what more specifically provides for the care of a child in school. IDEA is more developing the curriculum and the teachers. There are some children who need sign language to understand, well, how do you do that? IDEA. Medical issues are usually, the Medicaid funding goes in, $32 million. When that goes, what do we do?
I just have so much empathy. I have empathy for these kids and their parents. I have empathy for my mom works at Bradley Hospital and meets these kids and these families. I also have a lot of empathy for teachers. So teachers in a very real way are like the frontline workers with some of this, and will be most impacted by the loss of those students from their class, or they, in some cases, have to bring their own supplies anyway. But the idea that they might also have to bring food so their children in their class might have something to eat that day. I just have so much empathy for how hard it has to be for the people in these situations. But I do have a question. What are you hearing from local superintendents or school committees? How are they preparing for these changes or this uncertainty?
Well, they are terribly concerned. Some of these cuts don't go in right away. They were politically clever and say, let's do it after the 26th election, but they're coming. Some of the things that have happened this summer, for example, we had a significant amount of money for the state for teacher training, for activities that was held up for months and months and months until we forced them to release the money. So most superintendents are just kind of in a state of confusion as to, is this money coming? Can I really, will I get any money next year, et cetera? And they're trying their best, but you're right. Teachers are going to be facing very significant issues in terms of, they won't have access to the specialists that could deal with this child's particular needs. They could see situations where, some kids are coming in with nice, lunches and et cetera, and other kids standing around. And most teachers have got big hearts as well as, good spirits, so they'll help a bit. But, this is something we're undoing, basic values that we've legislated, we've enshrined, about trying to raise education standards up. We have a lot to do, frankly. I mean, we can't sort of say, well, we finished reforming education, but to take away food, to take away supportive medical services, to take away specialized programs for children with disabilities, it's terribly wrong. We have to put those programs back in place, and then we have to work together, teachers, parents, school supervisors, everybody, to increase our schools, make them better.
I think the conservative viewpoint on this is that these are states' rights issues, right? That states should handle these things better. Are there mechanisms at the state level here in Rhode Island to protect Rhode Island?
The mechanism basically is the states can run the education system. Yes, that's fundamental to the Constitution. But where do they get the money is the real question.
Right.
I mean, they could go in and say, listen, we're not going to change anything. Of course, it's going to cost us $100 million to replace the lost federal funding. Where do they get it? Again, as I said, their choice is going to be Do we save our education system? Do we save our healthcare system? Do we provide other programs that are critical? And that's the crisis that's being forced upon us. They could legally, constitutionally step up and say, we're going to replace every program that they've cut. It's money, we'll put the money in. The challenge is getting the money.
So, personally, how do you keep your spirits up? You've had a long career and a lot of work building these things.
Yeah.
And as you describe it, they are being dismantled in a politically motivated way and in a year, whatever. How do you keep doing your job every day?
I've always felt that, doing your job is critical. My training, after surviving the Sisters of Mercy and the Christian Brothers, I went to West Point.
Oh, I had the Christian Brothers.
It was easy because, they could yell at me, but they couldn't hit me. So, spending time in the Army, I commanded paratroopers. I understand that, frankly, there are a lot of people who are in tougher situations than I am. They're in a forward operating base advising people in a combat situation, et cetera. So it's tough, but you can't stop. You got to keep going. It's the frustration is that I think there are a lot of my colleagues, particularly on the other side, who understand the damage that's being done, and they're the ones who have to step up along with us, and I hope we can get them to do that.
So let's give our audience, listeners here in Rhode Island, some action items, both on student loans, where the rules are now being rolled out and written, and also on DOE. How can the average Rhode Islander get involved and try to make as much of an impact on this as possible?
Well, I think really the best way is to communicate with your representatives, both at the state level, because as I've discussed, this is going to roll down quickly to the state and what they're going to do. Getting involved in hearings in the state legislature, getting involved in local hearings on school committees, and letting us know what your feelings are is critical. I think the other thing, too, at the national level, if you have friends and colleagues in other states, particularly red states, make sure they know what's coming, because there's probably a lot of, this is going to be great, etc. Let them know what it is. And we're seeing that already. My Republican colleagues, many of them aren't having town hall meetings. Those that are meeting a lot of opposition from their neighbors, in Iowa and Nebraska, etc., who are looking at saying, hey, this is not working for us. So, but that has to go. And then most fundamentally, we have to gear up for the 26th election. If you care, then you better vote, because if you don't vote, then the decision's out of your hands, and you probably won't like what happens. So those are some of the things that we should think about.
So, Senator, I've been down in Washington, D.C. a couple times in the last few months advocating on Capitol Hill, in my case for the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act. And I have been shocked at how incredibly easy it is to get into the Senate office buildings and the House office buildings, how close you all are to the people. I mean, it's frankly easier than going through TSA in some ways. Can you talk a little bit about why all of you are still so close to the people, and frankly, why being in a small state like Rhode Island means you even have more influence sometimes on policy?
Well, being in a state like Rhode Island is a real benefit, I think, because we get to see our constituents on a daily basis. I just left a meeting, very thoughtful meeting with the Hospitality Association, talking about the challenges they face, and they're significant. So I get firsthand information. I don't have to, rely on a report from somebody someplace else. Then, too, we understand that we get a lot of great ideas from the people of Rhode Island. Their common sense and common decency is astounding. There have been programs that I have made national in scope that I heard about starting off here in Rhode Island. And that's important. And it's, it's just... every time I sit down with Rhode Island, either in Washington or here, I come away learning something and appreciating issues much better than I did previously.
So I have the unique experience of having lived in Delaware growing up and then here in Rhode Island. In Delaware, it's the same feel. So like your elected officials come into your high school graduation, and on Friday night football games, you like go and pet their dogs and see everybody, and they're members of your community. They are human beings. They express their humanity. They show up not just in times of crisis, but on Friday nights to see the local football game. And it like warms my heart, because I think in other places there's this incredible distance. The distance is like literally nothing.
Yeah, it's the amazing benefit of Rhode Island. I mean, very much so.
No, it's true. And, people who disagree with you can come across and let you know. They do. We do town meetings, and we have people who take very strong positions and disagree. But you have, one, the opportunity to make your case, but two, and just as importantly, you get to listen to their logic and to begin to think, well, that was a good point. Now, let me think, well, how that should affect us going forward. It's it's really for us, I think, a great benefit, and I feel in a way sorry for those folks in California, where you've got so many people. You don't go to a meeting unless it's 200 people because you don't have the time. Also, my colleagues out there in Montana, and so it's a 5-hour drive to the next stop where you're going to meet 5 Rotarians. That's hard work. So.
Well, I don't feel that bad for the people in California, because they have a lot of sun.
Well,
we don't always have such sunny weather.
Yeah.
Can I take a question on a different note? So I said you are the most well-known library advocate, and I thank you on behalf of myself and every librarian near and wide and far in our communities. But you're also known as a foreign policy for your foreign policy work and knowledge. Can you share a little bit about how recent foreign policy changes may impact Rhode Islanders? Because there's a misconception or a perception that it's just sort of happening over there, whether over there is DC or in a different country. But these changes have impact here, and I'd just like you to share a little bit of your wisdom with us.
Well, I mean, you can see the impacts, both plus and minus. One is that militarily, from the Department of Defense, we're really investing a great deal into submarine construction at Quonset Point. That is going to be a economic engine for the next 30 years. We're also in the process of bringing up NOAA from Norfolk, Virginia to Newport. I was there yesterday looking at the building. It'll be there done in 2027.
That's amazing.
It'll be 4 ships. It'll be a rotating group of people in the hundreds. But what it will do is cement our position as sort of the center of the blue economy. We have NOAA. We have, on a Navy-based Naval Underwater Warfare Center, where they do a lot of research. Then across the bay, we have the URI School of Oceanography. We are just going to be kind of the center of that. That's one of the beneficial aspects for Rhode Island. But overall, the administration has just done its best to alienate our closest allies. And our greatest strength as a nation was our allies. Russia could never call on allies. They didn't have them. China the same way. Now we're putting distance between ourselves and our allies with not just a tariff policy, but the weakened support for Ukraine, the disparagement in many respects of NATO, etc. And that can lead only to bad things. One is, in a time of crisis when we need help, they might say, well, that was then, but this is now. Sorry. I'm afraid, frankly, too, that there's growing discussion among the British and the French about their own nuclear force. And the more nuclear powers you have in the world, the more likely there's an accident. Forget a deliberate attempt at doing anything. That's a danger. We've got situations where, for example, taking apart USAID there's only absolutely stupid. The only presence we really have in Africa is USAID, working directly or through nonprofits. We have, under George W. Bush, they created the PEPFAR program for AIDS, very effective, et cetera. That's being ended. We have malaria program. Those are being ended. I had the opportunity to talk to the new commander of AFRICOM, who is a Air Force Special Operations general officer, very talented, very bright. He's been in Africa before. And I asked him, what are you going to do? I mean, you don't have any influence there any longer because, you don't have any military to speak of there. And if there is a malaria outbreak, you're not going to send American troops in there to train in a malaria outbreak. So we're really diminishing our reach, our power, our soft power, as Joe Nye, my professor at Harvard, would describe. We're basically stopping that. We're not joining international organizations. One of the ironies is that, Law of the Sea, for example, we've never ratified the treaty. In fact, Claiborne Pell, my predecessor, was really hot to get that done. And so the international bodies that design sort of plans for use of the seabed for mineral extraction, China controls them. They've got a seat there, and they're very influential, et cetera. So we're disparaging our neighbors like Canada and Mexico. That doesn't make sense. So we're in a situation where we're taking very, I think, erroneous decisions, and it's going to hurt us long term.
I was talking to one of our colleagues, Dr. Noon, the other day, and he was also talking about how it's not just the pulling out of an area or areas in Africa. It's also who then comes in to replace that, and what are the political ramifications of those actions, and how does that then impact us as a country, which I thought was sort of, as someone who is not knowledgeable on these things, I thought, I hadn't really thought of that.
You're absolutely right. The vacuum we left in the Sahel, which is the northern part of Africa, is being filled by the Wagner group, which is the Russian front. They're gangsters. China is moving up the west coast of Africa. They'd very much like to have a naval base there. They have one in Djibouti on the east side of Africa, but they'd like one over there because it's so much closer to the United States. And we're constantly trying to push back diplomatically, et cetera. But when you lose a lot of your credibility, like, those guys used to help us out, but they left. So, and now the Chinese are here, they want to help. It's poor diplomacy. It really is. And, the neglect of diplomacy, I think, is going to hurt us in the longer run. We're not really getting out there and being diplomatically aggressive. And, again, this alienation of everyone, our closest neighbors. What is, rather strange is, as you probably heard, that the president announced he's putting a 50% tariff on Brazil. Why? Because his buddy Bolsonaro, the former president, has been indicted by Brazilian courts and is being tried for alleged crimes. Is that a reason to slap 50% tariffs on a country? Oh, and by the way, it's one of the major sources of coffee in the world. We don't grow coffee in the United States. So put the coffee away. No, but
if you're listening to the podcast, I'm clutching my coffee cup near to me.
Well, when you drive up to Dunkin' Donuts and you ask for the medium coffee and they say that'll be $10, please. Mm-hmm.
No, you're at Starbucks.
That's 50. Yeah, good. Well,
Starbucks is going to be a lot more than that.
Forget it. It's Starbucks. But this is not. There's no diplomatic, national security or any justification. This is just personal pique about one of his friends being indicted, etc. And the consequences for the United States and for Brazil could be staggering.
Well, what I take solace in in what's happening in Washington, D.C. is frankly sober voices like yours that are down there saying exactly the things that you've said. So I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. But I have to warn you that Nicole asks weird questions. I've tried to rein her in a little on this one. But Nicole, this is a tradition that we have, Senator. Nicole, what is your question of the day?
Okay, so my question of the day, there's always a goofy one at the end. I tried to be less goofy today.
Oh, thank you.
With the hopes that maybe one day you'll come back. Here is the question of the day. If you could wave a wand and declare any Rhode Island place a national park without any legal ramifications, what place would you choose and why?
Well, what I would choose is the present National Historic Park, the Blackstone Valley National Historic Park. It is not a full-fledged national park, but it is recognized, and there are park rangers who do it, but it's historic. I'd like to make the whole area a national park. This was really begun under John Chafee. He brought me up there when I was in the House and showed me around what he wanted to do. And then we've gone ahead and we've got it declared a National Historic Park. But it represents one of the great aspects of Rhode Island. We were the heart of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. Slater Mill, bringing over the technology from Great Britain, starting it up, using water power, being ingenious throughout. In fact, by really the 1900s, Rhode Island was the Silicon Valley of America, and it started there. So I think that would be a good place to put a full-fledged national park.
Senator Reed, that was a very serious answer to a goofy question. So we run a social justice law camp for middle school kids during the summer, and we went to the new AAPI History Museum. We went to the Tamaqua Museum. They were both wonderful, but we also went to the Museum of Work and Culture in Woonsocket. And the kids absolutely loved hearing about the history, and the guides there did a fantastic job. My answer is nowhere near as serious, which is I have two. One is Eatery Square in Cranston. It's small, but it's adorable.
Well, it's yes. I know. We helped get some of the resources to fix it up. And we're proud to do so. As you know, most Cranstonians hail from Eatery, and that's why I'm from Cranston. So that's why every year they have the festival for La Madonna del Gevita, who is the patron saint of Eatery, Italy, because practically everyone in Knightsville at that time, 1900s, 1920s, were Italians from Eatery. And it's a great culture, and and the restaurants are superb, by the way. So.
Well, I am half Italian. My family lives in Cranston. I don't, but I love Cranston. I love
Cranston
food
too.
in Cranston. I love Cranston people. I love hair salons and nail salons and the Cranstonian look. But my other answer, which is somehow less serious than Eatery Square, is Allie's Donuts. I would have an Allie's Donut National Park, and on the big map it would have like Acadia in Maine and Allie's Donuts in Rhode Island, and that is what we have to give to the world.
Well, I certainly will accept any Alley donut that's presented to me. So No, well, we're lucky. We have extraordinary places in the state. A couple of examples. The Battle of Rhode Island was fought in Portsmouth, and there's a nice memorial there. Most people don't stop it, but there's a nice memorial there. But the significant thing, the 1st Rhode Island Regiment was composed mostly of African Americans and some indigenous people who had no freedom, but were fighting for our freedom. And that's remarkable. And they fought all the way to Yorktown. So a lot of people who have these notions about, these people, et cetera, they don't realize that our country literally would not exist without the courage and sacrifice of so many different people from all over the world. Well, so that's one place. I got others too, but
that links to my answer, which is more serious. I won't give you my crazy one, but my serious answer. I've become obsessed with the television show The Gilded Age, right? And of course, much of it's shot in Newport, but some of it's set in Newport too, right? And for me, this particular season, the history of the Black community of Newport, the elite Black community of Newport, is sort of this hidden history. And so for me, God's Little Acre is what I would recommend, because to me, it's the oldest intact colonial Black cemetery in the United States. We have lots of Civil War cemeteries, but I think that would be something really special.
Well, you're right. We assume the Gilded, Newport was just fancy rich people from New York, etc. The first elected representative in the state of Rhode Island was first African-American was from Newport. And I'm told he later went on to run the congressional dining room, because he was a hoteler, a diner, restaurateur, etc. But no, we've had a very, very, very strong Black community, particularly in Newport, because of the trading and the entrepreneurship down there. But we forget sometimes, many times, where we came from. And one of the things that that I always try to recognize is that eventually, we all came from someplace else. It might have been 10 years ago, it might have been 150 years ago, but except for the indigenous Narragansetts and others that were here, we showed up. And we should, and we were all treated, I think, pretty badly when we got here. But we should learn from that lesson and try to be much more hospitable and helpful going forward.
Well, I think that is probably the best note that we could end our podcast on, even though we've hit some dark places. We end on a positive message. Even though I'm a lawyer and a librarian and I know how to find any piece of information, I really do have a hard time sifting through when there's political talk and when there's facts and, sort of understanding the difference. And so I really appreciate you coming on our show and talking about some of these issues that I think affect all of us in Rhode Island. And I know that you are an elected official, you have a particular perspective, but you are elected to represent all Rhode Islanders. And I appreciate that you were able to share your perspective, but then also give a sense of where we're going and how this is going to impact all of us. And I really appreciate you coming and being here.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
So for our listeners, I do want to tell you something, that Roger Williams is convening a law school fair that's going to bring in 50 law schools. In fact, most of the law schools in New England will be there, and law schools from the West Coast all the way through to the East Coast will be at the Providence Marriott on the 12th of September. And you can go online to the Roger Williams Law website. You can scroll down to events and you can register for that event. So if anyone interested in law school, please let them know about the fair. And also, if you liked today's podcast, please subscribe, follow, leave us a comment. We are looking for your engagement. That's how we help reach more Rhode Islanders with this information about the laws that affect us here in this state. And next week, we're going to be covering Rhode Island's new law that covers the freedom to read, which my co-host Nicole was actually a major player in making happen, and was with the governor a couple of weeks ago signing the bill into law. And so look for that next podcast next week on the Freedom to Law bill, on the Freedom to Read bill, and also understanding why book bans are so dangerous to our students today.
I love that, the freedom to law.
Everybody
go out there and have the freedom to law. Thanks for listening. As we end today's podcast, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the passing of Alan Hassenfeld. The Hassenfeld Family Foundation makes this podcast possible, and Alan was instrumental in bringing Law 401 to life. We are grateful for all he did for the state of Rhode Island, for Roger Williams University, and for our law school. He will be missed.
Thanks for tuning in to the Law 401 Legal Issues Decoded podcast from Roger Williams University School of Law. We'd like to thank our guests on today's show. The Law 401 podcast wouldn't be possible without the generous funding from the Hassenfeld Family Foundation. We'd also like to thank our executive producer from RWU Law, Helga Melgar, the RWU Marketing and Communications team, and our production partners, Focus Forward Media and the Half Street Group. The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Roger Williams University or our partners. For more Law 401 episodes and updates,
Visit law.rwu.edu, YouTube, or follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts.